and I had been banished by Jehovah's Witnesses for over 2 years. Ah! And I was living out in the world. Oh, I like living out in the world. It's crispy. And one evening, I was at the mall, and I was walking out of the movies, and I saw someone from my past. Someone I had not seen in quite a while. It was a JW. But not just any JW, folks. This was a living legend. Like Tom Berenger? No! Even better than that. It was a man of unmatchable proportions. This was incredible. It was Iceman. I've mentioned him before, you may recall. In previous videos. Iceman was the closest thing I had to a friend when I was growing up. We were the same age and had known each other since before kindergarten. And he was pretty normal, I guess, until he got to be 12 or so, and he started demonstrating some extreme behaviors. What, like shopping at garage sales? No! More extreme than that. During his teen years, Iceman got into wedding planning. Weddings. Designing them. Getting I don't know. He did it all. Floral arrangements. Music selections. Decorating stages, designing wedding cakes, and photography. In fact, he accumulated a shelf full of wedding albums displaying his work. There was one thing about the wedding pictures, though. They didn't have any people in them. You see, he wasn't a wedding planner. He was a teenage boy. And, yeah, this was not normal. This was not normal, friends. And his mother enabled this. He was an only child, and his best friend was his mom, which is a problem right there. And his mom would do his hobby with him. She would rent out rec rooms and school gymnasiums and help him set up. But I don't know if she realized it or not, she was feeding into his addiction. He was addicted to weddings. Each one had to be bigger than the last and better. Tropical themes, Irish river dance theme, Hawaiian theme, double weddings. All with empty chairs and imaginary people. Well, I like imaginary people. They share their cookies with you. But don't worry, it was just a phase he went through for 3 or 4 years, and he grew out of it. And he became a young man now, and he had a new hobby. The Kingdom Hall. Iceman had a penchant for watching people and catching them. He was kind of like a vigilante. A type of vigilante the world had not seen before. When Iceman was about 17, he, do you guys know those TV dinner trays from the 1960s? It's like a little fold-out platform you can just scoot up right in front of your chair. Maybe you've seen them. Well, he found one of those at a garage sale, and it changed his life. He started bringing it to the meetings, and he would sit by the corner wall, and he had a notebook with him, and he would write in it furiously. But he wasn't taking notes on the meeting itself. He was recording his observations of the audience, the people sitting in the seats. If people didn't have their Watchtower lessons studied, he would write it down. If he saw someone doodling with a pen and paper, he would write it down. If he saw someone dozing off during the Sunday talk, he would walk over and tap them on the shoulder. One meeting I remember, there was a young married couple with a baby. Yeah, babies are cute, but don't ask them to share my food with me. And this young married couple with the little baby, they were always whispering, and they would constantly be handing the baby back and forth, handing blankets, bottles, whatever. And Iceman was getting irritated. And he stood up and he walked down the aisle, crouched down and said, "Excuse me, but how much can you be getting out of the talk when you're back here whispering?" And, the young husband was inflamed. And he said, "How much can you get out of the talk when you're back here whispering?" And they didn't like each other after that. A lot of people didn't like Iceman. The elders liked him. They did. The elders, they didn't seem to have a problem with him. But some in the congregation found his methods troubling. It wasn't confined to the hall anymore. A lot of people would be sitting by their windows, reading the evening paper, and they would see his car driving by their house, making 2 or 3 passes. And I know it was true because I went with him sometimes. It was like a paper route. And one day after a meeting, I was standing there when Brother Holderman walked up and confronted Iceman about it. He had a family picnic the day before, and some of his inactive family members were in attendance. Uh-oh! And his wife complained that Iceman was driving by and staring at them. Brother Holderman said to Iceman, he walked up and said, "Katie tells me that you were watching us pretty hard yesterday." And Iceman said, "Yes." And she said you made 4 or 5 passes. And Iceman said, "It was 6. But the effort was not in vain. Eventually, Iceman did produce some results. He busted a couple of people. Yeah! There was a carpenter in our hall that got hired to fix a leaky roof on a church. And I don't know exactly the rules of doing contract work for a church. I think it's kind of a gray area. Maybe someone in the comments section can enlighten us, but I'm sure the guy was just like, "Hey, it's a one-time, one-shot thing. Just a few shingles. I need the money. No one's going to see. Whatever." And, but Iceman was hot on his trail. Yeah, Iceman! And he snapped some Kodak pictures and took them to the elders. And I don't know that anything happened. Iceman said that the guy got one of his privileges taken, but after that came Iceman's shining moment. This was his grand opera. Do you remember the young married couple with the baby I was telling you about? Well, the young wife worked for a businessman. She was his personal assistant. And yeah, I think you can see where this is going. I know what's going to happen next. I already know. Her boss was invited to a banquet ceremony in Kearney, Nebraska, where he was going to be receiving an award. And he felt that she should come along too. Separate rooms, of course. The event was being held in the reception room of a hotel. And, folks, I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it. But Iceman got on the phone and he called all around until he got himself invited to that banquet. And he went out and he rented a tuxedo. Now, during the awards presentation, Iceman was careful to remain unseen. He did take note, however, that Lori and her boss were sitting awfully close together. I think there's something in the cooker. And towards the end of the night, on the ballroom floor, Lori and her boss were slow dancing together like a couple. And he was holding her close, and she had her eyes closed and was resting her head on his shoulder. That's when Iceman started strutting towards them in cavalier fashion with his camera in front of him. Click, 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 click. Yeah. Bingo. Iceman wanted to make sure that when she opened her eyes, she saw it was him. And this was a big deal, folks. This is a big deal. Shortly afterwards, the young woman got disfellowshipped and the marriage unraveled. And this was Iceman's crowning achievement. Yeah! It's how he got his nickname, Iceman. There was an old black man at our hall that said, "You are one cold brother." And he tapped his arm and he said, "You got ice water." You got ice water. It was the greatest thing Iceman had ever accomplished, and nothing would ever top it. Or so we thought. A couple of months after the 2002 district convention, a CD-ROM started circulating. Nobody knew where it came from or who made it. It was anonymous. But it was snippets of video footage from the convention, compiled into a video about an hour long. And it showed people in the audience. People chewing gum. People playing with their cell phones instead of paying attention. People falling asleep during the afternoon session. People scratching their asses. It was chronicling the bad habits and bad behavior of the people at the assembly. And a large amount of the video focused on fat people. Not just fat people, obese people. It showed close-ups of obese people eating during the lunch period. And they'd be having these big sandwiches with mayonnaise falling out on their shirt. It showed fat people with their mouths open, slobbering. Fat people walking upstairs. And the camera would zoom in on them. And they'd be breathing through their mouths and sweating. And then they'd come to the top of the aisle. And they'd be trying to scoot past people to get to their seat. And I guess the message of the video was that being fat was in itself offensive. That's what I gathered from the video. It's open to interpretation. But the video was a blockbuster hit. People watched it over and over again. People let each other borrow it. People made copies of it. And they invited friends over to watch it. And nobody knew who made it. Yes, Iceman had been operating a camera, but during summer district conventions, you got 2 or 3 guys at the top of every section with tripods. Anyway, the video was a big hit. It was all the rage. And it was all people talked about for the duration of the year. Friends, I was a JW for a long time, and I've got a lot of stories. But what comes next is the most epic thing that has ever happened in Kingdom Hall history. I shit you not. Yeah! Get ready! Iceman began producing a show called This Week in the Congregation. Now, this was after I moved away, but apparently, Iceman created a video presentation on his computer, burned it to about 20 DVDs, put them in homemade cases with covers, homemade covers, and mailed them anonymously to people. And when people saw it, they flipped their shit. No one had ever laid eyes on anything like this ever before. Oh, this was 10 years ago, people. This was before YouTube. A homemade TV show exposing people. And people couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was just like a TV show. It had an opening intro. I still remember it. There was a saxophone. And a star zoomed across the title screen. And it said, This Week in the Congregation. Yeah! Oh my God. And it even had pictures of people in the congregation floating across the screen like they were actors on a sitcom. Now, this all sounds tongue-in-cheek, but it wasn't. He took this seriously. This was serious to Iceman. This wasn't a joke. Now, the title of the program was This Week in the Congregation. However, it only came out about once a month, and there was only about 5 or 6 episodes made. The premise of the show was this. It begins with a very revealing video clip, about 2 minutes long, chronicling someone's double life or secret behavior, followed by a 10 or 12-minute talk, then another revealing video clip, followed by another short talk. Now, the talks were usually just him reading something from the Watchtower or sometimes reading something from the Bible. It was filmed in a dark room, and he was wearing a mask and a cape. And his voice was digitized to conceal his identity. He was good, folks. He had some computer skills. He was very intelligent, very crafty. But it was obviously him, and everyone knew it was him. But he never let on. Not even a twinkle in his eye. When he came to the Kingdom Hall, he did his perfect Clark Kent routine, and he was good, you guys. He was really good at this stuff. Now, the little sermons he gave were kind of boring. But the video footage, folks, it was dynamite. It blew people away. I remember the first episode. It starts like this. It's dusk outside. The camera is shaking. You can hear leaves and sticks. And you're like, what am I looking at? It's dark. The camera comes into focus and you can make out that it's Brother Tice, a family man in our hall. He's wearing a white shirt and tie, and he's got his sleeves rolled up. Then you see a little orange glowing ball lift up to his face. He's standing on the back deck of his house smoking a cigarette. And The second video clip on the video has Iceman holds up a pornographic magazine to the camera. It's from a gas station. He has a porn magazine. And he holds it up to the camera so you can see what it is. Then he, do you guys remember the carpenter who got busted for working on the church? Well, he had a workshop downtown, and he would park in the lot out back. Between his back door and the parking lot, there was a concrete planter about waist high, and Iceman puts the pornographic magazine on the ledge of the planter, and he hides away at a distance for some hidden camera gold. Yeah! And of course, the brother walks out. He's walking to his car. He sees the magazine. And he looks around to see if the coast is clear. Then he picks up the magazine and puts it inside his coat. And he walks to his truck. And he sits inside and he's flipping through the pages. And yeah! Oh, dynamite. A month later, episode 2 comes out. This time, the footage is outside the Kingdom Hall. There's 2 men standing in the parking lot talking. And the one man, well, he's got a 10-year-old son standing there with him waiting. The kid's bored. And he's there dressed in his little shirt and tie and meeting slacks. And he's got both hands in his slacks pocket. He's playing pocket pool. He's bouncing his package around with both hands. And Iceman zooms in on it with the camera. And then he gives his talk where he reads from the Young People Ass book. The chapter on masturbation. Yeah! And, oh, God. The second video clip on the video. It's during the meeting, and the same dad brings another one of his kids outside, takes off his belt, and starts whipping the kid's ass. And the kid's screaming. I mean, this kid is just getting his ass blistered. And you cringe. It's hard to look at. This kid is getting his ass torn up. And Iceman followed that with a talk he did from a watchtower on discipline, which it was confusing because I couldn't tell if he was for or against corporal punishment. I don't know. That wasn't clear. I think I missed the purpose of that one, but it was obviously Iceman. He missed 2 Sunday meetings in a row to get that footage. For whatever reason, though, the elders took a hands-off approach and only made a lukewarm attempt to curtail the whole thing. I mean, there was a talk about not looking at information that doesn't come from the faithful and discreet slave. Yeah. At one meeting for field service, there was an elder that directly mentioned the controversy and was like, well, we know there's still some of those DVDs floating around out there. We need to round them all up and turn them into the brothers, all right? But, yeah, what's going on? But this week in the congregation was enormously popular with the young people. Anyone between the age of 18 and 30 was watching it. And it was a frenzy. It was the new sensation. And it got taken to a new level. Episode 3 was a special edition. There was this white trash family in the hall that nobody liked. They were really poor. They had like 10 kids. And they lived at a shitty old house out in the country. Well, it's hidden camera time again. And we see the family loading up in a station wagon and leaving for the meeting. Because they live out in the country, they leave their doors unlocked. And Iceman runs up with his camera and goes inside. Their house is a filthy pigsty. Clothes everywhere, trash everywhere, stacks of plates, old food setting out. And Iceman is walking all around the house recording it. Well, the money shot comes when he walks out the back door onto their enclosed porch. And there's this Folgers can there. He picks it up, walks out to the driveway, and pours it out. It's piss. And yeah! Again! And after episode 3 came out, it was like mass hysteria. An absolute free-for-all, you guys. I mean, the following Sunday, 220 people showed up for the meeting. The memorial was 210. They didn't even have enough chairs. And there was an excitement in the air. Now, I was living in Kansas City during all this, but I heard about it over the phone. And in 2004, my sister even mailed me some of the DVDs, and I invited a couple of young brothers over to my apartment, and we watched them together. And we were laughing hysterically. And the brothers were high-fiving. And one of them goes, "This is incredible. People just found these DVDs in their mailboxes? I've never even heard of anything like this." And I said, "I have, actually. Back in 1996 in Dodge City." And I proceeded to tell him about back in 96, there was an effeminate brother in the congregation, which is no big deal. A lot of brothers have feminine... There's congregations with kind of sissy men in it. It's not a big deal. It doesn't mean they're gay. But the guy did have a Gone with the Wind license plate, so there might have been something going on there. Anyway, it wasn't a problem. Until one day, you see, there were 2 attendants at the hall. People assigned to help visitors find their seats, etc. And he was one of them. Well, they were having a problem in the hall with kids getting up to go to the restroom, and then they'd be hanging around in the restroom and messing around instead of returning to their seats. And the elders put this effeminate brother in charge of going into the restroom and kind of policing the situation. Well, some people in the hall kind of recoiled at the idea of him being in the restroom with kids. And one woman got vocal about it. Sister Harbin, an 80-year-old woman, wore big hats and collar pins, very opinionated, and she started expressing her dissatisfaction with the situation in car groups. It's okay. That's what car groups are for. Gossiping and complaining, it's all right. Here's what's not all right. Challenging the elders. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you think you're doing. You won't survive that. You got the JW fairy tale guarantee. You don't go up against the elders and win. And it so happened that a dozen people in the hall one day received anonymously written letters in their mailboxes saying that there was a homo in the hall and the elders weren't doing anything about it. Well, everyone knew that the letters were from Sister Harbin. It was almost word for word what she had said in field service. And other witnesses confirmed that. And she was disfellowshipped. And about 4 years later, she got sick and died. The irony being that this woman had been a staunch JW for 45 years. Then winds up dying alone. She doesn't even get a Kingdom Hall funeral. She gets the same generic burial all the other DFs get, and only about 12 people showed up. And as I was recounting this long-forgotten incident to my Kansas City friends, I remembered a small detail. Iceman's great aunt lived in Dodge City. She was friends with Sister Harbin. They went out in service together. And that's when I realized Sister Harbin didn't send those letters. Iceman did. He was 17 years old. And I leaned back in my chair and I said, "Oh, Iceman, what did you do?" Anyhow, flash forward to 2011 again, and I'm walking out of the movies, and I see Iceman. He sees me, and I can tell he doesn't go to meetings anymore. He's got a goatee. His ears are pierced, and he sees me. I'm wearing a rock and roll T-shirt. It's obvious we're not in the truth anymore. We're worldly. And so we didn't even talk about that or mention it. We just were happy to see each other. Handshakes, pat on the back. Talked for a few minutes. I said, "I heard you moved over here and did this and that." But anyway, I say, "I gotta go, but let's have lunch." And he said, "Meet me Saturday at the burger place we used to go to." And that weekend, we got together. Behind the burger place, there's a picnic table under some trees, and we sat there for over 3 hours, just talking about old times and gossiping about all the JWs we know. I love gossiping about JWs. Fuck them. Assholes. Yeah. And, however, the conversation took a listful turn before long. Iceman started looking really sad the more we talked, and he began lamenting what he called titans falling. He used that expression, titans falling. He was talking about the adults we knew in the 1980s, people we were raised around and looked up to, and how many of them had failed in the truth and fallen away. Joey's parents split up. The Macy's broke up. Helen and Tate got divorced. It seemed like all our friends' parents from the 80s either got divorced or had some other terrible thing happen. Then there was good old Uncle Joe. Yes, Uncle Joe. He was pushing 60, but a couple years earlier, he left his wife for a 20-year-old girl in the hall. And they ran away together. They got a trailer out by the lake, and they said they were gonna raise horses or something. But I guess one morning he got up really early, and he made breakfast for himself. Then he went outside and he got the toolbox from his truck. This was one of those big, heavy metal toolboxes full of wrenches and stuff. And he picks it up and he wraps his arms around it. And he held it really tight. And he walked out into the lake. And that was the end of the legendary Uncle Joe. Iceman's stepdad was gone too. His mom, who was now advanced in years, had broken her hip while cleaning out the gutters. And she was immobile. She was in a wheelchair for a long time. And Iceman's stepdad took care of her for a couple of weeks, but he said it was too hard, and he packed his bags and he left. He moved out. And I think that's why Iceman quit going to the meetings and fell out of the truth. He seemed to be fixated on broken families. Maybe his early obsession with weddings connects into that. I'm not a doctor. What am I? What am I, you guys? I'm an internet comedian. Yeah! Anyway, some dark clouds were starting to come in, and it started thundering. And Iceman said, "It's 4 o'clock. I'd better go." The weird thing was, we didn't say goodbye. We just kind of nodded and walked to our separate cars. And no sooner did I get in than it started pouring rain. And I backed my car out and I started to leave when I saw Iceman at the other end of the parking lot. He was standing in front of his car and his French fries were all over the ground. He dropped his to-go box, and I pulled up closer to see what was wrong with him. I couldn't tell if it was rain hitting his face or if he was crying. But his eyes were shut, and he was standing there with his head tilted back, and he was just letting the rain pour down on him. I started to roll down my window to say something, but then I thought that would be gay, so I just turned out of the parking lot and I drove home. A couple of nights later, I had a dream again, you guys. I had another nightmare. My dad was in it this time. He was wearing old man glasses and his hair was gray. And he was all alone, way out in the middle of nowhere. And he was on a barren terrain. And he was dragging a sled full of items behind him. The sled was piled up with books and clothes and boxes, even a TV set. It was just stacked to full capacity. And the peculiar part is that my dad was wearing moccasins and leather pants, and he had feathers around his neck. And which was odd because my dad is not a Native American. He doesn't even like Native American stuff. It creeps him out. He's white. And for a long time, my dad is walking through the wilderness. And he has a rope over his shoulder, and he's dragging this big, heavy sled behind him. And he finally reaches a road, and he stops, and he looks around like he was supposed to meet someone there. And then he takes off his glasses, and he looks down the road. And it goes for miles through the desert, and it winds through a mountain range. And he sees how far it is he still has to go. And he drops the rope, and he lays down on the ground. And he doesn't get up again. You guys remember a video I did with Yahweh to Hell? Talking about JWs having night terrors, and then they call out Jehovah's name to save them. Well, I never did that. But I guess one time I did call out Jesus' name during the night. I sat up in bed and I said, "Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on with me?" and I had been banished by Jehovah's Witnesses for over 2 years. Ah! And I was living out in the world. Oh, I like living out in the world. It's crispy. And one evening, I was at the mall since before kindergarten. And he was pretty normal, I guess, until he got to be 12 or so, and he started demonstrating some extreme behaviors. What, like shopping at garage sales? No! More extreme than that. During his teen years, Iceman got into wedding planning. Weddings. Designing them. Getting the... I don't know. He did it all. Floral arrangements. Music selections. Decorating stages. Designing wedding cakes. And photography. In fact, he accumulated a shelf full of wedding albums displaying his work. There was one thing about the wedding pictures, though. They didn't have any people in them. You see, he wasn't a wedding planner. He was a teenage boy. And, yeah, this was not normal. This was not normal, friends. And his mother enabled this. He was an only child, and his best friend was his mom, which is a problem right there. And his mom would do his hobby with him. She would rent out rec rooms and school gymnasiums and help him set up. But I don't know if she realized it or not, she was feeding into his addiction. He was addicted to weddings. Each one had to be bigger than the last and better. Tropical themes, Irish river dance theme, Hawaiian theme, double weddings. All with empty chairs and imaginary people. Oh, I like imaginary people. They share their cookies with you. But don't worry, it was just a phase he went through for 3 or 4 years, and I was walking out of the movies, and I saw someone from my past. Someone I had not seen in quite a while. It was a JW. But not just any JW, folks. This was a living legend. Like Tom Berenger? No! Even better than that. It was a man of unmatchable proportions. This was incredible. It was Iceman. I've mentioned him before, you may recall. In previous videos. Iceman was the closest thing I had to a friend when I was growing up. We were the same age and had known each other